Hello and welcome to Gatecrashers. Today we are exploring Gate 24 and it's called The Return, and we're going to meet Pippa. Pippa had a song in her head. This was not unusual. Pippa almost always had a song in her head, had for as long as she could remember, been the kind of person whose mind latched onto a melody with the cheerful tenacity of a terrier who has found something really interesting and has absolutely no intention of putting it down. It could be anything, a jingle, a fragment of something classical heard through a neighbour's window, three bars of something she couldn't name that had drifted out of a passing car on a Tuesday and taken up what appeared to be permanent residence. The current one had been going since Monday. It was now Friday. Pippa hummed it absently as she made her coffee, not because she wanted to hum it, but because the alternative, trying not to hum it, had been thoroughly tested and found entirely counterproductive. Her flatmate Jess had given her a look over breakfast. Still? Still, Pippa said, without apology. Do you know what it is? Pippa considered this. I think it might be something from a film, or an advert, or possibly I'm just making it up at this point. Jess retreated behind her toast with the philosophical resignation of someone who had lived with Pippa long enough to know that the song would stop when the song stopped, and not a moment before, and that any attempt to intervene would be unsuccessful. This was entirely correct. Jess was a quick learner. The thing that most people didn't understand about Pippa, the thing Pippa herself had taken some years to understand, was that the looping wasn't the problem. The looping was the process. It looked from the outside like a woman who had a song stuck in her head and couldn't concentrate properly and had been meaning to send that email since Wednesday and kept starting sentences that she didn't finish because something else had arrived that needed turning over. From the inside, it felt like being in a workshop where something was being made in the back room. She couldn't see it, she couldn't hurry it, she couldn't even quite tell you what it was going to be when it was finished, but she could hear it. The low, constant sound of something being worked on, returned to, refined, in a rhythm entirely its own. Pippa had learned to trust the workshop. It had taken a while. The difficulty, and this was the particular difficulty of Gate 24, the one that could make the looping feel less like a process and more like an affliction, was the not knowing. Not the content of the thing being processed, but the when. The not being able to say, this will be ready by Thursday, or I'll have the answer by the weekend, or I'll know before the meeting on Tuesday. The Ajna Centre, where Gate 24 lives, is an awareness centre. And awareness centres carry anxiety, the mental awareness centre. The anxiety here is specific, the anxiety of not knowing what you don't know, of holding an inspiration that has not yet resolved itself into something rational, something communicable, something you can hand to another person and say, here is the thing I've been turning over, and now I understand it well enough to share it. Until that moment, and that moment always comes in its own time, in a pulse, not a process, there was only the loop, the song, the returning, the patient, slightly maddening work of an ajna that would not be rushed. Pippa had spent a considerable portion of her 20s trying to rush it. This had produced, among other things, 3 notebooks full of conclusions that turned out not to be conclusions in any way, 2 very confident announcements of ideas that subsequently revealed themselves to be totally half-baked, 1 spectacularly ill-timed presentation to her entire team, and a brief but committed period during which she had convinced herself that the solution to the looping was to simply think harder, faster, and with more deliberate intention. The thinking harder, faster, and with more deliberate intention produced nothing except a fairly ferocious headache. Now, not every Pippa arrives at this in the same way. There is another kind, a quieter, perhaps less inclined to hum in public, but recognizable if you know what you're listening for kind. This Pippa also has the gate, also has the loop, also carries that individual inspiration rotating patiently in the back of the mind. But this Pippa has decided somewhere along the way that the not knowing is a problem rather than a condition. That the loop is a malfunction rather than a mechanism. That the anxiety of the ajna, the persistent low hum of not yet, not yet, not yet, means something is wrong. This Pippa has gone quiet. Not a peaceful quiet, but the quiet of someone who has stopped trusting what's happening in the workshop. Because the workshop was never, as far as this Pippa can tell, producing anything worth the wait. The inspiration still arrives. It can't help arriving. It's in the gate. But it gets met with suspicion rather than patient attention. Turned over once or twice and then put down, too uncertain, too unformed, too difficult to explain. The loop continues, but underground now, unacknowledged. Less a workshop and more just a room with the door closed. Same gate, same individual inspiration, cycling patiently towards its rational form. One Pippa hums along and waits for the drop, and the other has stopped listening for it. Both are processing. Only one of them knows it. The thing about Gate 24 is that it doesn't announce itself. It doesn't send a calendar invitation or clear its throat politely before delivering. It drops. Complete, quiet, entirely certain. And if you're not ready, it's gone before you can catch it. Pippa had learned this the halfway, the hard way even. No halfways with 24. The specific occasion had involved a shower, a revelation of considerable personal significance, and absolutely nothing to write on. Pippa had her eureka moment, but by the time she'd got out of the shower and found a pen, the knowing had retreated back into the workshop, leaving only the faint outline of something important lingering in her mind and a mild but lasting sense of injustice. The shower board had appeared the following week, waterproof marker included. She had been carrying something for weeks now. Not the song, something underneath the song, something looping at a level below conscious thought, while conscious thought got on with the business of daily life. An inspiration that had arrived fully formed and entirely inexplicable sometime in late October that she had immediately attempted to analyse, explain and present to 3 separate people who had looked at her with the polite bafflement of people who have been handed something that has not yet been translated into a language that exists anywhere on earth. She had concluded, reluctantly, that she must have been mistaken, that it wasn't a knowing, just an idea, a thought, and a not particularly well-developed one at that. She had put it down, or tried to. The loop, as it happens, had other ideas. And then on a Saturday in November, standing in the shower with the song from the dentist going round and round and round in the background, something simply arrived. It dropped. Complete, quiet, entirely certain. The thing she had been carrying for weeks, suddenly in a form she could hold up to the light and see clearly. She reached for the board, wrote it down, dripping in 3 words that somehow contained the whole thing. She got out, made coffee, opened a notebook, wrote it down properly, then sat back and looked at it. And it was, and she took a moment to sit with the mild astonishment of this, exactly right. Not a thought or an idea or a half-baked notion. A knowing. Precise, individual, entirely hers. And now, finally, in a form she could offer to someone else. The song, in her head, had stopped. Gate 24 lives in the Ajna Center, the mind's awareness center, the place where inspiration meets the requirement to be understood and received by the collective. It sits in individual circuitry in the channel of awareness with Gate 61, the gate of mystery, the gate of inner knowing, of inspiration that arrives without explanation or invitation. And together they form the channel that carries something genuinely new, something that has not existed in rational form before, from the place of unknowing all the way to the place where it can be communicated. This is the channel of the inspired mind, and the Ajna's job, Gate 24's specific, patient, loop-intensive job, is to take what Gate 61 receives and make it into something the collective can hear. Because the collective is, reasonably enough, somewhat suspicious of inspiration that cannot explain itself. It needs a rational form, a shape, a way in. And Gate 24 provides that, not by forcing, not by analyzing, but by returning, by looping, by trusting the process of the workshop, even when the workshop offers no updates and no estimated completion time. Individuality is acoustic in nature, which is why the song gets stuck. The loop is not an accident, it is the mechanism. The melody going around and around and around is Gate 24 doing exactly what it is designed to do, holding the inspiration in motion until the mutation can happen, until the thing that was unknowable becomes, in a pulse, known. It will not be rushed. The pulse arrives in its own timing and not before. The anxiety of not knowing, the particular ajna hum of, oh, what if I never understand this? What if I'm just going in circles? What if the knowing never comes? Well, that's all part of this gate too. Not a problem to be solved, but a condition to live with. What helps is not more thinking. What helps is trust. The self-trust of someone who has been through enough loops to know that the workshop delivers. Not always on time, not always when needed, but eventually it delivers. You know what you know when you know it. And not, it should be said, a moment before. Pippa still loops, obviously. This is not going to change. It was never going to change. And she has, at this point, made a thorough peace with it. And she has also, slowly and with some evidence to support the trust, stopped fighting the timing. She no longer attempts to preempt the drop or explain the inspiration before it has resolved itself, or present the half-formed thing to rooms full of people who need it to be whole before they can receive it. She has learned to say, with a lightness that would have been entirely unavailable to an earlier Pippa, it'll come to me, and mean it, and wait. She keeps a notebook by the shower now. Jess had asked once what it was for. It's for when things drop, Pippa had said. Jess had considered this with equanimity, the equanimity she brought to most aspects of living with Pippa. Does that happen often? For more than you'd think, said Pippa. Less than I'd like, and exactly when it's supposed to. The song from the dentist has been back since last Tuesday, for what it's worth. A different dentist, a different song, the same cheerful tenacity. Pip isn't worried. She knows by now what it means. Something is on the way. Thank you for joining me. Thank you for meeting Pippa and Gate 24. And until we return again for the next gate, as always, love yourself wildly, completely. Keep returning to that one. And as always, go gently.